I'm Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these.
Hello, hello. Thank you all for being here on a Monday night. It's a little bit of a different night, but this was the day we were going to be able to do this. So, this is part three of a series that Adrian Hicks and I have been doing about the Khazarians, essentially about modern Jewry, be that the modern Jews that we know of today, and then also other people that we might consider Jews. A couple of the areas that we wanted to dive in deeper was the homeland of the modern Jewish people, and then also the missing Hebrews. So this part three is about the homeland of the modern Jews, and then part four, which is going to be on Friday night. I don't have the thumbnail up yet, but mark your calendars. It's going to be on Friday night. We're going to go into the missing Hebrews. We're going to have a lot of receipts. We're going to talk about books, this book that's right behind me, which is an excellent book, and talking about who the missing Hebrews are. Before I do all that, so that I don't have to keep saying it over and over again, I'm playing my disclaimer about talking about the Jews just real quick.
It is not anti-Semitic to point out that certain elites throughout history, including the Khazar ruling class, have strategically adopted Judaism not as a matter of faith, but as a tool for political sovereignty, identity control, and economic insulation. Just as the Vatican weaponized Christianity to justify imperial expansion and the British crown cloaked colonization in divine monarchy, some elite families used Jewish identity not to elevate a people, but to shield their own power. Critiquing those historical power moves is not a hatred of Jews. It is a rejection of using any religion, Judaism included, as a camouflage for conquest, manipulation, and unearned legitimacy. If you can call out papal tyranny without being anti-Christian or condemn Western colonialism without being anti-European, then you can damn well expose elite identity fraud without being anti-Semitic. The real anti-Semitism is pretending all Jewish people share the guilt of a few who turned sacred identity into a political weapon. There's my disclaimer.
Thank you for allowing me to play that. Okay, so before we get into it, let me say hello to some people. Adrian is first. He says it's on. Auntie is here with the peace sign, my favorite auntie. Inspired Truth is here. Adrian says, let's hear it for the dancing Maggies. AB Media is here. Spain Man is here. Hello to everybody. If you are watching from the clouds, say hello in the chat. This is the best live tribe on YouTube. You will be welcomed as long as you're appropriate. And shout out to the replay gang. So before we get too far into it, let me give the introduction to Adrian, since some of you may not know who he is. And if you didn't watch part one and part two, you may not know who he is, but I would suggest you go back and watch it. So it is my great honor to introduce Adrian Hicks. He is the vice president of our local community benefits association. He is a dedicated researcher whose work reflects both rigor and relevance, and he holds the unique distinction of being the first and to date the only member of the Kansas Education Research Network without a formal degree. His inclusion speaks volumes about the quality and impact of his scholarship. Adrian is widely respected across sectors for his insight, integrity, and unwavering commitment to equity and community-centered research. Among his many contributions, his leadership within the Community Benefits Association has been instrumental in advancing practices that meaningfully reflect the voices and needs of our neighborhoods. On a personal note, I hold Adrian in the highest regard, not only as a colleague and collaborator, but as one of my very best friends. Our work together as co-authors has deepened my appreciation for his intellect, his generosity, and his vision for what is possible when research is guided by justice and grounded in lived experience. Please join me in welcoming Adrian Hicks.
What's going on? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Good, good, good. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Let's dig in.
Okay, so I'm going to give a little preemptive. So, as if I haven't had enough of those. Um, my preemptive is that we're going to talk about two specific places tonight. It's not that we're going to make the case for one specific place, because there are a couple of different Jewish people that we're going to talk about.
Mhm.
Oh, thank you, Adric. It's the it's the Adrian Hicks tax.
All right. I get
Thank
my
you,
own tax.
Adric.
Finally.
I appreciate you so much.
Uh,
On one of the shows that I go in on, sometimes they have a 57-cent tax. So that's what it reminds me of. Hi, Vincent. He says aloha from Hawaii. So the first place that we're going to talk about has to do with the Ashkenaz. And that's because our part one and part two, who we were really talking about was the Khazarian Khaganate and their move towards Judaism, and then their elites sort of infiltrating Europe. So the first people I want to talk about are the Ashkenazi. So let me give a little preemptive in that, and then we'll talk about some points that sort of back it up. So by the 900s to 1000s of the Common Era, Kiev sat at the hinge between the Jewish Khazar sphere and the Slavic North. It's on the Silk Road. A real documented Jewish community in Kiev with Turkic and Slavic personal names, right? A Khazar Jewish diplomatic record on Ukraine's doorstep. The disputation in the primary chronicle, which is a Khazar named district inside of Kiev, and long-range merchant networks link Jewish life, law, and trade to this region. Linguistic arguments about Yiddish's Slavic substrate and genetic findings that many Ashkenazi maternal lineages are European let us know that we can model Ashkenazi formation in and around the Dnieper. Oh, I'm not pronouncing that right. Dnieper. Dnieper? But that's the Black Sea corridor. So we're just going to
right.
call it the Black Sea corridor.
There we go. That's better.
Right, rather than just only the German Rhineland. So if we put all of that together, Kiev, better known as Ukraine, is a plausible homeland for a large share of the population that became known as Ashkenazi, which is the primary population of modern Jews. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, you and I have had conversations both online and not, and um, I can't remember what program it was that um, we had linked each other to, but you look at some of the old maps of Khazaria, and then all around it is Rus and Bulgar, and so Rus, for those who are unaware, is Russia, right? And Bulgaria, they've been warring with these factions of this whole time, and it's like Khazaria just kind of became Ukraine, and Kiev was already there because they founded it. So
Right. That was the interesting thing, is that before it was even called Ukraine, Kiev was there. They founded
mhm,
Kiev
right.
in Khazar.
Mhm. Khazaria,
Okay.
absolutely.
So the first thing that I was going to talk about is the Kievan letter, which is preserved in the Cairo Geniza, is a Hebrew plea. So it's written in Hebrew, issued by Kiev's Jewish leaders on behalf of a robbed debtor. So it lists signatories with Hebrew, Slavic, Turkic names. It bears Turkic runiform. And that runiform is it's a wordage that says I have read it endorsement, sort of like I saw this, rubber stamp, right? That is evidence of close contact with the Khazar Turkic elite, right? Because it's a plea on behalf of a debtor to the royalty or to the rulers of that era. So this is direct proof of a Jewish community in Kiev at 930 CE. So the exact time that we're looking at. This is centuries before the great eastward migration, right? Before they went into Germany or the Rhineland. So one of the things that was making me think of when they're talking about debtors was, we have heard the phrase Jewish mafia.
Mm.
We've heard this phrase before. And there are stories about Jewish Khazarian people sort of committing this identity fraud with traders who were traveling on the Silk Road. Do you remember what I was talking about?
Yeah, I do. Before we move forward there, I kind of wanted to take a step back and um, not to surprise you with something, but um, you know, we had looked at some information before that had shown where the Ashkenaz at a certain point, because they were going back and forth with, or I should say, the Khazars were going back and forth with, if I'm not mistaken, the Persians. There's lots of warring going on, back and forth between those two groups. And I- if I'm not mistaken, at some point the Khazars had kind of started to woo some of the Sephardic um, Jews that were to their west, if I'm not mistaken, to come into Khazaria kind of as a refuge, as a homeland, if you will, at that time. And so when we talk about the Eastern migration, I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page with you. Would that have perhaps been the Sephardic Jews that they were wooing to come into Khazaria at that time too?
Well, my point was that it's prior to them going to the Rhineland,
Hmm.
but you also bring up a really good point, and I can't remember. I can't remember either if it was Persia or Assyria, but there was some, there were Sephardic Jews in that area,
Hmm.
and they were being oppressed in whatever way, possibly some expulsions going on. And so Khazaria had said, hey, you guys can come here.
Hmm.
Now, this is a time when they're transitioning into being a Jewish state.
Right.
And so it would make sense for them to bolster their numbers by opening the doors to any Jews around, especially ones that are being expelled. And this also, in a way, can legitimize
Right.
their Jewishness
That's
because,
where I was headed with it. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yep.
because they saw at the time Sephardic Jews being more Jew than they are.
Yeah. So
So
perhaps an opportunity to pick up on some cultural practices and norms,
right,
things
and
like
then if
that they
they're
weren't aware of.
intermixing, so
Hmm.
they're learning more about Judaism, they're learning more Hebrew, they're intermarrying,
Right.
just sort
Right
of
there.
legitimizing their claim. Now, interestingly enough, we're gonna talk about the Sephardic Jews as well.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's a really valid point, is that they bolstered their numbers even before this migration into Germany. But the migration into Germany were the royals, the elites. It was the people who had the money to migrate out when Khazar was falling. Everybody else was just left to fend for themselves.
Yeah, because to your point, it was the Khaganate that first adopted Judaism, and then kind of, like you were just mentioning, kind of trickled down to the rest of the population.
Right. I mean, they became a Jewish state. So it was sort of
Hmm.
like it was the state religion. It was that area's religion. And
Right.
so this is the one we're following. Um I don't remember seeing anything about people being in trouble for not following Judaism. But it wasn't long after their transition into Judaism that Khazaria fell. So I don't know that they had enough time to really kick everybody else out.
Right.
Um, okay, so in in the medieval era, Kiev's commercial quarter, which is called Podil, contained a specific ward, right, in the commercial quarter of Kiev known as Kozar. So it's literally a
How
neighborhood,
convenient.
right, in Kiev, in the commercial quarter. Okay. No, in the commercial quarter, of course, right? Because merchants, known as Khazar, which is, it means Khazarian area.
Hmm.
Okay, the Khazar. So it indicates a resident Khazarian Turkic presence integrated in Kiev's economy, even during medieval times. So remember, like I said, the elites and the people with money are the ones who moved and integrated in the Rhineland. Everybody else, who couldn't afford it, had to stay. And
Right.
so they were integrated into this merchant economy. Okay, so it even says that these Khazarian Turkic Jewish people in the commercial quarter sold salt, caviar, and other goods. Like, we can literally point to what it is they were trading, right?
Hmm.
And it's exactly where the Jewish merchants are known to have thrived, right? So the name of that ward really anchors that Khazarian Jewish footprint into Kiev itself. When Kiev was the capital area, was a place that was already established by the Khazarians, and the Jews that they left behind stayed there. But as they were coming into Judaism and becoming the Khazar, or they were the Khazarian Khaganate, this was their area, where Ukraine is.
Yeah.
Let's see. So the primary chronicle, which I had talked about before, puts Jewish Khazars at Vladimir's court. So this is in 986. Okay. In this classic disputation scene from Prince Vladimir's conversion, Jewish Khazar envoys argued for Judaism. So the Khazars who had converted were like, we need to get more people to convert and on our side, especially royalty. Royalty was always the thing. So these Kievan elites who had become Jewish appear before Prince Vladimir, and they're arguing for Judaism for Prince Vladimir, right? These elites knew, met, and debated with Jews identified with the Khazarian world. So this locates the Jewish religious authority in Kiev's political theater on the eve of the mass Christianization that was going on.
Hmm.
So, you had the Ottoman, or the Byzantines, right? It was the Byzantine Empire that was there at the time. Like, they were between the Islamic and the Byzantine Empire. What was the area where the Islamics were? What was that called? There was a title for that.
No, the Caliphate.
Yes, the Caliphate. Thank you. So they were stuck in between the two.
Yeah. And I'm trying to. It was the Caliphate. It was. Oh yeah, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that.
Hmm.
Umayyad, I believe, something like that. Umayyad Caliphate,
Okay.
which again, incidentally, also included parts of Persia
Oh,
or
okay.
Iran.
Okay. So, and something interesting to bring up, when you bring up Iran and, the names of things today,
Mhm.
because we'll read these stories and see these things, especially like biblically. We'll read things in the Bible or ancient documents and whatnot, and we don't actually know where these places are. And, another area there, Afghanistan, you have Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, that are all Mesopotamia, Sumeria. So
Mhm.
anytime you read about Mesopotamia, Sumeria, that's those places. And those places have been fought over
for
since
centuries.
it's right, since this time. I
Mhm.
mean, these areas are being fought over at this time. And, Russia and the United States have fought over those areas over and over and over. And
Yeah,
it's
in fact,
interesting.
I think Iraq was Babylon, if I'm not mistaken. Iraq was Babylon. I'm like 99% sure of
Well,
that.
I will believe you because you're pretty smart. So then we have multiple Jewish, Christian, and Muslim sources, including the Hasdai ibn Shaprut, which is King Joseph correspondence. Okay. So we have Hasdai ibn Shaprut, who is corresponding with King Joseph, right? They describe a Jewish ruled Khazaria spanning from the northern Black Sea Caspian Arc, geographically overlapping southern Ukraine and Crimea. So when the Rus sort of smashed Khazaria and made it fall in the late 900s, Jewish Khazar elites and their communities had every reason to flow into Kievan Rus polities, right? And along the Dnieper, I'm going to go with that is the how to pronounce that, those trade towns, right?
Okay.
They had to flow into the trade towns because Rus took over. Russia took over at that point in time. So if they couldn't be in the exodus to the Rhineland, then they were absorbed into these trade towns and they would have gone to their capital, to
Mm.
Kiev. This is seeding and reinforcing that Jewish life in and around Kiev. And they are talked about in these letters back and forth between Hasdai ibn Shaprut and King Joseph at the time.
To your earlier point, isn't it interesting that Ukraine and Russia are still fighting over the same land, almost a
Right.
thousand years later.
And they talk about how there's two different people there.
Hmm. Yeah,
And Stacy
I think
says
what
you
is
are
it?
correct. Babylon was located in the area of Iraq. And thank you for being here, Stacy.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. In fact, I think what was it in the Donbass area, this contested Donbass area in the current conflict? It talks about being highly ethnic Russian, in that area, and the Ukrainians were shelling that, which brought an end to the I believe the Minsk two agreement, which is again putting more fuel on the fire, for the current conflict. A thousand
Exactly.
years later, they're still fighting over this stuff.
Right, and it's very interesting when we're talking about a Jewish homeland in Kiev and in and around Ukraine, and you look at the level of Nazism in the current Ukrainian government.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me question who are they talking about when they talk about ethnic Russians that are
Mm-hmm.
being bombed. Who actually are these people that are being bombed because there's a lot of Nazism in the current Ukrainian government. It's weird, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
Don't they
And
have a
Russia,
political party that's based in Nazism?
it's a battalion. It's a military battalion called the Azov Battalion.
Mm,
And at first, if I'm not mistaken, because I can be wrong on this, but I'm willing to be wrong. But at first, they were kind of a militia group or something akin to that. And what was interesting is that they were absorbed by the military. Um,
mm.
uh, so that's interesting. You got this. I mean, most countries wouldn't touch a Nazi militia group with a 10-foot pole, but you absorb them into your regular military. That's kind of interesting.
I mean, most countries, but the United States did.
Well, the the United States. Of course they would.
Right, Operation Paperclip. Okay.
So,
So my next point, there is the Geniza trade papers. So the
mhm,
Geniza trade papers fit Kiev into the Jewish mercantile web. And this is why I say, why I had made the comment about, the Jews who stayed there would go into these trade areas, because going into mercantiles, doing trade, all of those things is a long-standing tradition of the Khazarian Jewish people. And so this is what has happened from their conversion up to present time, being in trade,
yeah,
we'll say,
yeah,
trade and control of the flow of goods. And so the Geniza trade papers have Kiev directly in the Jewish mercantile web. So, and the Geniza is is Cairo. Okay, so the
right,
Cairo Geniza shows Jewish merchant partnerships spanning the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, the Volga Dnieper routes, and Kiev set right in the center of that artery. So this is a community engaged enough to issue the Kievan letter, fits the, oh my gosh, Radhanite style Jewish commerce. I may have to look at more into Radhanite style that stitched together Khazaria, Kiev, and the Near East, right? Because again, Silk Road, there's a lot of trade going on, right? But
right.
it shows that deeply embedded there was this in Kiev and in this entire area, these Khazarian Jews in the mercantile class. So the other thing that, might be pushback is that when people talk about Ashkenaz, they always want to say that's German, that Ashkenaz is German. And so there's a
Really?
couple things with that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was, it just kind of hit me, and that's what I was just asking, really, because I don't think German when I hear Ashkenaz, but
Yeah, that generally comes up. And like if you do just a quick search of
mhm.
Ashkenazi Jews, it says Rhineland, it says Germany, right?
Oh, okay, okay,
And one of the things that you had brought up before was that um, Ashkenaz as a name
hmm,
was a descendant of Japheth in the
right,
Bible.
yeah,
And so that is one thing that we should be thinking of when we say Ashkenaz. The first thing that we
hmm,
should be thinking of is that that's a descendant of Japheth, not of Shem,
right,
which Shem led to Eber, and Eber is the father of the Hebrews.
Brew,
That's where the name Hebrew comes from. The Hebrews are the descendants of Eber. And so, Eber is in Shem's line, but Ashkenaz is in Japheth's line.
right,
So that's the first one. Um, so ancient and medieval authors locate Ashkenaz. They put Ashkenaz in the Scythian Black Sea north. So um, Josephus, he's one that does. Later philology ties Ashkenaz to the Iranian Scythian Askuza. So none of these are the Rhineland, right? Only later does Ashkenaz crystallize as something to mean the German lands, right? Again, if you do just a quick lookup, it's going to tell you Germany when you look up Ashkenaz. So the older geographic memory, unfortunately, does not go away. we can recenter the Ashkenazic origins in the Pontic steppe Ukraine area zone before that label itself migrated out.
So, do you think that it, crystallizing up north was just a matter of convenience? Kind of, I won't even say coincidence, but convenience. Oh, we're here, so Ashkenaz is up here with us now.
I think it's interesting that I think a lot of it has to do with the name change, right?
Hmm.
So while we're here, we're the Khazarian Khaganate.
Right.
Then don't look behind the mirror.
Right.
Hey, hey, who are you guys? All you whole bunches of people. Who are you? You just got here. Like
Yeah.
I didn't ever see you before. We're
We're in
Ashkenaz.
Ashkenaz, right?
And they're like, where do you come from? Right here. We've been here the whole time. But you didn't see me. I see you.
We're hiding behind the rocks, you know.
Right. So I think that's part of the problem, and where, that pushback always comes on, well, Khazarian isn't Ashkenazi. But other people have proven, you and I have proven through our discussions and our showing of receipts, it is the same people. As
Right.
much as they want to say they are not, they are. There's
Hmm.
way too much proof for that.
Hmm.
Cynical Optimist is in here. Thank you for being here, Cynical Optimist. So I think, that's something to always keep in mind is that people will tell you who they are and you have to listen to them.
Right.
Right? So why would they name themselves Ashkenaz if not after Ashkenaz? Right?
Yeah, that
I think they kind of made a mistake. Like we're looking here in Eber's line and oops,
we don't see you.
right, right. But then they call themselves what? The Hebrews. They call
Right.
themselves the Hebrews. They call themselves the Israelites. They call themselves the Jews from Judah, that they are Judean, of which they are neither of the three. Okay.
And maybe this is skipping ahead a little bit, but when you control all the narratives and you control the flow of information and who gets to say what, and then you can be whoever you want to be.
Well, and that kind of goes back to those tales of the Khazarian mafia doing identity fraud to, so these stories, just to catch people up, was that there are stories that the Khazarian mafia would sit along the trade route, along the Silk Road, and they would invite these traders in, these people who are traveling for trade,
Hmm.
right? They're delivering goods. They would invite them in, they would feed them, give them a good evening, give them wine, be really nice to them, have conversation, find out where they were going, where they were taking their goods, who they were supposed to meet, when they're supposed, all the details. And then, according to these tales, they would then kill those people, assume their identity, take their goods, travel to the place, say they were them, meet up with the
Hmm.
people. They had all the information. I'm supposed to meet so and so here at this time on this day, and they would get the money. And that's how they operated their mafia, was by identity theft. And we kind of, and I talked about it in my Jewish disclaimer, we talk about identity theft a lot with these specific people.
Yeah. Wouldn't you like to know
Um,
what's in the catacombs?
oh, I always want to know what's in all of the catacombs. Can we just be honest and say there are catacombs literally globally and nobody wants to tell us what's in the catacombs?
Right.
Or the mounds or the necropolis or any of those things, right? Because we can't talk about it. Pottery. We can talk about pottery. That's all they give
Plate,
us. The
knives and
plates,
forks.
right? They had cups, guys. Wow.
Right. So, look at this wonderful advanced civilization. How do we know? Well, they got plates
They
right
got
over there.
this is a pitcher. Woo!
Right.
It's a pitcher. I don't care about your dishes. And, we can all hope that someday when they're looking at our time in history that they're not just checking our dishwasher,
Yeah.
for,
You know.
for what we were about, what we stood for, how we operated, how we practices, right? Like, don't check the dishwasher. That's
Yeah.
just not what we need to do.
Adrian ate a lot of brisket. Oh, that's wonderful.
um, so I want to talk a little bit about Yiddish, though, because Yiddish is very particular to Ashkenazi Jews.
Hmm.
Okay, Yiddish, for anybody who's not sure, this is sort of an evolved or what it kind of makes me think of is like, and I'm not saying it's childish, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is it reminds me of when you're a child and everybody's in the club, and so you guys make up this special language, like
No,
you speak Pig
it's Pig
Latin or
Latin.
Ubbi-Dubbi or, you know, like you make up this private club only language that only
Yeah,
we know.
yeah.
That, um Leon's mad at us for streaming late. Um,
Sorry, Leon.
Leon, the baby will be up in a little bit. You'll be fine. Um, that's what Yiddish kinda reminds me of. It was like it's like this private language that was developed among the Ashkenazi Jews, right? So, mainstream linguists, though, they all agree. So, this is common knowledge. Yiddish is saturated, is made up of Slavic phonology.
Mhm.
It has Slavic syntax. It has Slavic core lexicon. Paul Wexler talks about it saying Ashkenazim are largely Slavic and minor Turkic.
Yeah, and
That
when they took over the area of uh, Palestine, they really pushed that Yiddish was spoken.
right, and Hebrew. Everybody had to speak Hebrew, and that Yiddish was only secondary to that. It's sort of
Right.
like Yiddish is the at-home language, like between friends, but Hebrew is of the royal. That's the academic language that they say. So converts sort of re-lexified or redid the lexicon with some German vocabulary. Like they just threw in some German vocabulary,
Hmm.
right? So an early dense Jewish life among Slavic people east of Germany is consistent with Kiev being the cradle of that Yiddish language. Makes sense?
It makes sense to me.
So it would have been, at the point in time they're trying to make their, boys only, girls are icky club, and they wanted their own language, they would have been doing it close to the time that they left Khazaria. This was going to be the way that they could communicate with one another.
Right.
And so they brought all of that with them into the Rhineland. Leon says Yiddish language for the elites. He's saying the same thing I am because it was the elites and the royals of Khazaria
Who
who
first
came into
took
the
on?
Rhineland.
Hmm. Well, and again, it was the elites of Khazaria who first took on Judaism. Like we were talking about before. Before it trickled down to the rest of the masses.
And so, if we want to talk, which we've talked DNA before, right? So when we look at the lineages of Ashkenazi Jews, okay, they have prehistoric European founder lines, okay? The paternal lines are Near Eastern. So that's what you would get if this male rabbinic mercantile elite line embedded into European, right? Because these would be mostly males who would be coming from Khazaria, and then they would marry female Jews,
Okay.
right?
I appreciate you clarifying that, because when you said Near East, I was going to ask you if we're talking about um, the Minor Asian Steppe
It,
area,
it would be
which would
it
be
would be like
Khazaria.
the yeah, it would be the steppe. So these males would be bringing that line and then intermixing, right, with royals in that area into these sort of elite bloodlines, okay? So if you have these prehistoric effects, right? The paternal line has the steppe blood, right? And then the female line is European, right? So it's sort of this uh, Dnipro, I'm never going to say it right, Khazar Kiev, right, on the male line fits their exact genetic admixture. So when we look at people today, and there's lots of videos up of people who are Ashkenazi Jew, who are modern Jews, right? They might not even tell you I'm Ashkenazi Jew, but you can see it when you look at them. And they're doing their DNA and they're like, oh no, I'm European and maybe just, Turkic.
Right.
They may have some Turkic blood. And some are surprised, some are not surprised. They're like, "Oh yeah, no, that totally makes sense." Right? But, having your DNA traced and checked is illegal in Israel, and their population's primarily made up of Ashkenazi Jews, but not 100%, but primarily. You can kind of see why, because it really negates their Israel is our homeland theory,
Right.
because the DNA says Europe and Turkic. Okay. Um, so there are Turkic speaking Judaic groups in Crimea and Ukraine to today. There
Right.
has been a durable Jewish presence on Ukraine's southern flank from medieval times at least onward. We have proof from medieval times onward. And that's exactly where the Khazarian and the Kievian spheres sort of congregated. So we don't know if they're exactly Ashkenazi ancestors, but these are people who have been there for thousands of years. So we would assume that their existence showed this this as a Jewish Khazarian homeland, that this is sort of an ethnogenesis for them. This
You
is
know,
like the motherland.
I know that a lot of this is going back and reviewing some of the things that we've talked about before, but you know, is it just me, or did we hear everything that we needed to hear about it when we learned that every uh, current Israeli or every Israeli prime minister changes their name to sound more, you know, Mediterranean or Arab, instead
Mhm.
of Greenstein and things like that,
Right. Instead of these Turkic sounding names.
Yeah, yeah, Turkic European, sounding names. It's like you said, they'll tell you who they are. I'm a Greenstein, who I
Hmm.
am, you know,
Right.
today, and then tomorrow I'm, Godot or
Right.
Netanyahu.
Gal Gadot.
Right.
So Leon says, Lord, I have gone up the Rothschild's family tree and whelp all of those Germanic house names just disappeared. And then they centered the Rothschild surname and continued to marry their sisters and nieces. Yes, there are a lot of founder effects among and birth defects that happen because of that. That's how we get blue-blooded elites, and
Yeah.
different blood disorders. But
Mhm.
I talked about before in another show, I think it was in the Ancient Britannics, actually, how the current royals in Great Britain were actually from the House of Gotha. So they were Goths.
Mhm.
They were Germanic and were not ever originally from that land. So, this whole identity theft thing, it works for a lot of royals,
Yeah.
right?
Rampant.
The ancient Britannics were black. And now we have the House of Gotha is ruling and say we're British. We are the Britons when they're not. They're the Goths.
Mm.
Right. So that includes the current king and princes and all that kind of stuff. Also, I also recently learned that even the elites that we have in the United States today are still dealing with the Rothschilds. There are still private deals going on. Our current president borrowed money from a Rothschild when he was going through hard times. But that's not what we're here to talk about, the Rothschild.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But yes, definitely founder effects among elites of all kinds. Even in Egypt, guys, these founder effects happen because people try to keep their lineages pure. It's not as bad in Egypt and Kemet. But blue-blooded elites were specifically because the best person to marry is your niece, and
Mm.
second to that is your cousin. And if you can't do either one of those, then your sister's just fine.
Ugh.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
I learned from you that Goth points back to who?
Neanderthals.
Neanderthals, right? Yeah.
Right. The Goths, everywhere there are Gothic homelands, and people who descend from the Goths are where we find the highest percentages of Neanderthal DNA.
Mm.
So, those hominids that we know as Neanderthals, also we would know them as Goths and the House of Gotha. Today, I also refer to them as Japhethites because that seems to be that lineage. When you look back at the ancient writings, Old Testament, Hebrew writings, Japheth was made white. Ham was made dark as a raven. I think it was like that, like black like a raven. And Shem was made black and beautiful. So the theory is that, Hamites are very dark, Shemites are not as dark.
Right.
So, but Japhethites were made white, and Neanderthals sprung into whiteness. So when Neanderthals came into being, they were white and blonde haired, and light eyed. So, that's why I call them the Japhethites.
And apparently they loved it because it's like, yo, I'm gonna hook up with my cousin and we're gonna keep this thing popping.
Right. The Neanderthals did not necessarily mix. Now, the Heidelbergensis hominid, they mixed, Denisovans mixed, Homo sapiens mixed. That's where we get Homo sapiens sapiens. There is mixture, but Neanderthals, while they did mix, that's how we have DNA today that is there. There's nobody that's 100% besides Marjorie Taylor Greene. There's nobody that's 100% Neanderthal DNA. They eventually did mix before they sort of died out. That's what they say. They died out. I think
They did not die out because
I
Marjorie
think they
Taylor
just
Greene is still here.
I think they're the reason we know that song, "She'll Be Coming Around the Mountain When She Comes." I think they just went on the back side of the Caucasus Mountain and then came back out and said, "We're Goths." We changed
Did
our
you ever
name.
show
Like,
that? Did you ever show that picture of Marjorie Taylor Greene next to
the Neanderthal woman
the
from the
Neander? Yeah,
museum.
yeah, yeah.
I
The
have shown
statue.
it on my channel before. I don't have it queued up, but you guys definitely you can Google that. But
Yeah.
that whole it's the same story though. We're Khazarian, and then we're gonna move over here. Now we're Ashkenazi,
Right.
so we're Neanderthal. Now we're gonna move over here. Hey, we're Goths. So Spain Man says it reminds me of Stargate. Yeah, definitely. Well, Spain Man says I can't go too hard on her right now because she's on the right side of, yeah, because she's fighting APAC. Listen,
No, I mean,
listen, everybody's right sometime. Oh, am I cutting out, Sam? Leon says I'm losing connection.
uh-oh.
Let me get. Okay, I'm going to keep watching Leon. If I lose connection again, let me know and I'll switch to a different Wi-Fi.
To your
Oh,
point, she's still horrible. She just happens to be right on like a couple things. Still horrible.
right. So
Make no mistake.
nobody is. I mean, if anybody's going to be that dumb, it's her, but nobody is wrong all the time. You know
Mm-mm.
what I mean? And honestly, had APAC not pissed her off, she wouldn't be doing what she's doing now.
Right.
If they would have continued kiss her butt. So,
Yeah, she's right on
oh,
APAC. She's right on the Epstein files. That's about it.
yeah. Okay, Inspired Truth says it was Leon's connection. Okay, so we're good.
Okay.
So Khazaria was broken and started falling around the 960s, right? The Jewish Khazars, the Near Eastern traders, the Slavic converts, they all had an incentive to consolidate, right? Because they're falling.
Right.
And not everybody could exit the building, right? So they had an incentive to consolidate where their laws, their trade, and any protection they might have would converge together. So this is the Jewish Khazars, the Near Eastern traders, the other Sephardic Jews who had come into Khazaria, the Slavs who had converted, right? They all needed to be together, right? Where they could be protected. Kiev is the
Right.
place where they would be. So this is before the onward dispersals, some went north into Rus, west into Poland. Lots went west into Poland. Think about
Lots
that
went
when
west
we
in
talk
Poland.
about the
Yeah.
numbers during the
The
Holocaust.
Halloween
So
cost.
the Halloween cost. They went southwest along the Danube, right? But Kiev is exactly the nodal point between all of those dispersals as well. So Kiev is the point, is the motherland of these Khazarian converts who led to all the Ashkenazim. And since a vast majority of all modern Jews that claim Judaism, they are Jewish,
Mhm.
are Ashkenazi, then I propose that Kiev is actually the homeland of Jewishness,
Yeah. Yeah.
or at
I mean,
least their homeland.
yeah, it seemed to me that it's the epicenter, and it seems that, they weren't getting kicked around just as long as they were in Kiev. As soon as they started moving around to other places, then you got the pogroms in Poland and Russia and things like that. Once they started moving around, that's when all the kicking around started happening.
Right. Had they stayed in Kiev, it might have worked out.
Might have been all right.
So So, like I said, the classic story when we hear about Ashkenazim is that it is Rhineland, right? But those are the Khazarian converts who came in, right? Um, I wouldn't deny that there's jewelry in the Rhineland even before the Khazarians got there because they married into elite systems, into the mercantile class. So there was jewelry there prior, right? So it's just that this Rhineland um, Ashkenaz merger or Khazarian merger tells you why so much of it is Slavic and Yiddish
Hmm.
and why their DNA is exactly how it is.
Hmm.
Um, some people have debated the Khazarian conversion. There was one letter that I talked about on here, or that you and I talked about, that said that the Khazarians were Hebrews before, but they all had, Turkic names.
Right.
None of them were following the Hebrew customs, and they had to learn about Judaism. Remember, they
Right.
had people come in to teach them
Hmm.
Judaism. So I don't think we could debate that. Um, and another pushback that we might get is this Near Eastern paternal ancestry, right? Doesn't specifically say Ukraine. But we don't have a way to identify specific Kiev or Ukraine DNA. It's regional. So we
Right.
have to put that DNA with all of these other points to show, Kiev is the homeland of Ashkenazi Jews. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I completely agree. It's like you're just saying, it's kind of the epicenter of the language, and there's a whole city that was founded by the same people, and it just so happens that the DNA points to this certain region. How many YouTube videos have we seen where people are taking their DNA for the first time, because it's so taboo in Israel, and every time without fail, almost no exception, it comes back and says Eastern European, Eastern European, Eastern European, Eastern European. Okay, so where in Europe are we talking about?
Right. Um, so Leon says, I don't think what she's doing is out of the blue, being anti-small hat land, is for a political position that American society is taking. She will benefit
No,
and get reelected.
MTG.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't disagree. I think, she is a politician, end of the day. As crass as as crass as she is, and trying to be like, white people's every woman. It's strategic. She is a politician.
Yeah, I think she's reading the room. I think that she's seeing that, there's kind of a backlash with being associated with folks who are doing, things militarily, that that aren't necessarily super popular. And um, I think that she's saying that ship is probably gonna sail, as far as people being or as far as APAC or groups like that being really popular politically. There's going to be a lot of blowback. I mean, the more that you continue to hammer down on the American people and tell them that you can't say this, you can't do that, you can talk about anybody else you want to except for these specific people. You know, it's Americans are going to Americans are going to push back. They always do
Yeah.
on something like that.
Yeah. So Sly is on here, says he descends from the house of Abba, from the
Hmm.
Kabars, who were the rebel Khazars, and from the Avars, from the Avar Khaganate. I have not looked into any of that, so that might be interesting to look into
Very
it.
interesting.
Yeah. Vincent, yeah, 12 tribes. Yeah, Vincent, there were 12 tribes. And Spainman says, yeah, it's a net win, though, in my opinion. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like I said, we were going to talk about two specific areas, because we were talking about the Ashkenazi Jew whose homeland is Kiev. Oh, one other point that I didn't bring up that I did want to say, I'm going to say it. I wanted to play the video, but I did not have time today to get it pulled up. But there are people in the Middle East who are literally asking how in the world these Ashkenazi Jews could be from Israel when they can't be in the sun. So apparently, you will see the Ashkenazi Jews, they're wearing hats, they use umbrellas, they have scarves, they're doing all of these things, sunscreen, all of this stuff. And they literally, people will not be out in the heat of the day because they cannot handle the sun. And so the question from these actual Semitic people is, how is this your homeland when you can't handle being here? Like, you literally can't live here because of, your genetics.
I can already hear the excuse on that, which is to say, well, we kind of went away for 1,000 years, and we changed a little bit because we were over here, in the Caucasus Mountains for 1,000 years, and we're back, and we just kind of want
Yeah.
to set up shop.
It takes longer than 1,000 years. You know what I mean? That to make any types of changes like that. Like,
Yeah.
Cheddar Man, so in ancient Britain, Cheddar Man's 26,000 years ago, and the people who descend from Cheddar Man are still heavily freckled people,
Mhm.
because they developed the birth defect of losing their melanin from where they're at. That's 26,000 years. Like, I think it's going to take a lot longer.
Well, the sun's different over there in Kiev, you know? I'm joking, but that I think that goes back to what did we say, Abdul Nassar?
Oh,
He said
yeah.
he went away black and he came back white.
Yeah, the Jews went away black and came back
Hmm.
white. Spain Man says, my thing is, in what other context would this be okay? Retaking land millennia ago is stuff of villain plots. Oh, yeah, it is. It is. I mean, and think about even when they were doing it, they were trying to pick a land where they're just going to go in and kick everybody out. Like, we get to just pick a place. Like, it would be like somebody telling me that I could just pick a house. Just move in. And
Yeah.
literally, that's what they did. They literally went in and pulled Palestinians out of their houses and moved these people in same
Hmm.
day with their stuff.
Well, I
Like,
mean,
it is
the whole
villainous.
boat ride with
Oh, yeah.
the binoculars, and people are watching, areas get shelled, and they're there with their kids and saying, "Hey, that's our house. We're gonna take that. That's our land. We're
Right.
gonna take that
We get
that piece
that
right there."
land.
Yeah.
Soon as people hurry up and die.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
I think on the
allowing
first
children.
show that I was, yeah, and which is even more diabolical, is that you're letting kids watch other kids. But
Right.
I said in the first show that it's the perfect white supremacy. You know,
And Spain Man, I think they wouldn't have ever picked Argentina because wasn't Argentina a big repository of Operation Paperclip?
repository of the rat lines for sure.
Yeah. Oh, Paperclip came into the US. Sorry, the rat
Yeah.
lines from the
Hmm.
Romans, the Catholic Church.
Right.
Yeah, so I think they never would have actually picked that because then who gets to win that? Who gets to win over who gets to be in charge? It's already being fully run by white folks in that area, for sure. Okay, so question. We are an hour in and we've done half.
Mhm.
We still have not gotten into the other Homeland. So I think what we could do is on Friday we could do part 2
Okay.
of the Homeland. And then because I kind of already know when we talk about the missing Hebrews, it's going to be more than one, it's going to be more than one part. So we can call today part A of the true Jewish homeland and Friday do part B of the true Jewish homeland. Then we'll start scheduling all of the missing Hebrews episodes. Does that work for you?
Works for me.
Okay, awesome. Well, I thank you all for being here. I thank you, Adrian, for being here. These are
Wouldn't
great
miss it.
conversations that we have. And shout out to the replay gang. I'm going to show you all a picture of my dog.
Please like the video if you haven't already. It really helps the algorithm to know what kind of things you like. Share where you think it's appropriate, especially to someone who you think needs to hear it. And don't forget to check out some of the wilder Pivot Point Wednesday shows. And last, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, especially if you want to break down complex concepts that make the esoteric not so teric, helping you on your journey to become your most authentic self. By subscribing, you'll join a community that thrives on curiosity and growth, and you'll never miss out on insights and some wild discussions. Let's uncover the universe together. Bye.